Hi everyone, this is another of our virtual videos for the ILS NYC conference. Now, unfortunately, we had to postpone the event in person through till April the 22nd. Tickets are still available, so if you'd like to get registered for the event, please do visit the Artemis website. But we wanted to run some interviews with the kind sponsors of the event so that we could showcase their thought leadership and thank them for their support as well. And for this one, I'm delighted to welcome Vincent Prabis, Managing Principal at Hiscox ILS, one of our gold sponsors for the conference. So welcome, Vincent. Really good to see you.
Hello, Steve. Thanks for having me.
So as ever, we're looking at the development of the insurance-linked securities market, and Hiscox ILS, part of a global insurer and reinsurer, the Hiscox Group, and you've got great access to business, a well-established ILS fund franchise. So I thought it would be great to get Vincent on to talk about renewal trends and also hear his ideas on what's going to be important for the ILS market as we move through 2022. So perhaps, Vincent, to begin, maybe you could give us a bit of a recap of the recent January renewal season, which I know is still being closed down by some teams. But how was this for the Hiscox ILS team, and what sort of footing do you think that puts your portfolios on for 2022?
Yes, thanks, Steve. We're pleased to say that it was a successful period for Hiscox ILS. In general, we renew about 50% of our gross written premium at 1/1. And because we had increased AUM due to continuing support from our existing investors, we were able to take advantage of what we saw out there. It's a bit too early to share specific numbers, but we observed significant hardening in many areas of our portfolio. So the environment is very favorable at the moment, and we do plan to see growth in the coming year.
Yeah, that's good to hear. Good to hear that you had some success on the fundraising side as well. That's very, very positive for this year, enables you to take advantage of market conditions. And market timing is a topic that's often brought up in ILS circles, and people are obviously saying that now is a good time to enter ILS and perhaps as good as it has been for a good number of years. Would you concur with that? What advice are you giving to investors that have been looking at the space and thinking about making their first allocations?
Yes, that's an interesting one. I mean, our outlook on ILS as an asset class remains positive due to the ongoing repricing and the fact that it, in our view, continues to deliver attractive and uncorrelated risk-adjusted return. But we are constantly reminding our investors that it is difficult to approach this asset class with a market timing attitude. But of course, you're right, it's nevertheless easier to come in after a series of large events than just before. So the last few years have been difficult for the ILS market, and it has helped, if we can say that, or that gives an example of the importance for allocators to choose their managers wisely. It's not all about performance. I've said that before. It's not just all about performance. It also has to do with the whole experience that investors have with their managers. Does the manager have the best access to risk? The manager offers the full suite of underwriting services. That is something that I think moving forward will become more apparent. So at Hiscox ILS, we're just dedicated to placing investors at the core of everything we do. Not only does our dedicated underwriting teams provide access to portfolios of risk, but we sit alongside our investor throughout the life of each contract.
Yeah, and you made a very good point there at the start of your comments that timing is not just about timing the market, but it's about entering the market with the right sort of frame of mind, and especially with a long-term view that investors really need to have in this sort of asset class. It's not really a space that you can deploy money into and time your exit for a profit. But where do you see investor appetite at the moment? We've heard a lot recently about redemptions and also some investor exits, or perhaps investors cycling out into a different segment of ILS, such as catastrophe bonds. But it also seems to me that we're beginning to see some new investors entering the space as well.
Yes, you're definitely right. We are seeing some ILS fatigues from some investors. Some of the experience they've had, both on the performance side or the relationship they've created and partnership, has been disappointing to some. So we're aware of some allocators that are multi-managers in approach have made some changes and adjustments to their panel. But we're also seeing, as you're saying, increased interest. The increased interest seems to come from the larger institutional investors, those that are already in the space for a long time, that have been riding this storm and are considering increasing their footprint in the space. And that is great news for all of us. We're also hearing, you're right, from newcomers coming in, and that's, you've been reporting recently on names that, to be honest, a lot of us out there had never heard from before, and that's excellent news. So we believe that now is as good as any good time to enter, and there are plenty of opportunities out there to feed those new interests from these new investors.
And I suppose the broader macroeconomic environment at the moment maybe plays into the hands of an alternative like ILS as well. Stock markets and other asset classes have had a very torrid time over the last few weeks in particular, and that always raises attention on the true alternatives and the real need for diversification, which helps to drive home the thesis of ILS investing, I suppose. Now, whenever I speak with investors these days, climate risk is obviously one of the topics that's front of mind, and I assume this is the same for you in your discussions with investors at Hiscox ILS. But what do you tell investors with respect to climate change, and how do you look to alleviate their concerns?
Yes, thanks. As you can imagine, that topic is part of every discussion we are having at the moment. What we tell them is that as an insurance and reinsurance group, we've been in the industry for over 120 years. Being therefore insured and paying claims is what we do. At Hiscox ILS, we continually assess the impact of climate change risk to ensure that we're pricing adequately and protecting our capital base so we can be there to pay the claims should event occurs. So how do we do this? That's the tricky part, where we've developed a climate dashboard that's embedded in our investment process, and that helps us identify, quantify, monitor, and manage the impact of climate change on our strategies, natural catastrophe exposure. And we believe that's essential in achieving long-term sustainable returns. So basically, I strongly believe that the insurance, reinsurance, and ILS industries together will continue to adapt and adjust in order to provide sustainable returns and ensure that it remain a trusted and reliable source of protection for the insured, ultimately, now and in the future as well. So we're here today in order to be here tomorrow, and that resonates well with our investors.
Yes, and again, a very good point there, that really the key to this is ensuring that pricing is moving in the right direction as our understanding of risk evolves as well. And a subject that really goes hand in hand with the climate topic is obviously ESG, which is a hot topic in the ILS space and broader investment universe. What's the Hiscox ILS view on ESG? How applicable is it in the ILS sector? And what kind of opportunity do you think this could present?
Yes, our investors are interested in the relevance of ILS from an ESG standpoint. That's for sure. That very often comes next in the discussion we're having with them on that topic. What's interesting is, of course, as I say, it comes from investors, but to be honest, at the moment, there is interest in the ESG performance also from regulators, from the media, of course, but also from the employees internally. And it's never been greater. So it is becoming a a global topic that we are addressing, not just for the investors. So as leaders in reinsurance and the ILS industry, we of course have an important role to play in helping ultimately our customers prepare for and navigate this complex issue. That is the complexity of it is often put forward, and we need to make sure that all parties come along with us, really. So while we all agree that ILS as insurance or reinsurance is intrinsically positive as an asset class in its role in protecting society against natural peril, we need to make sure that if we're trying to attract ESG focused capital, we just need to do more. The sheer fact that the asset class itself is positive is not enough. And it was maybe a bit naive of us managers to believe that from the beginning. There's a lot more work that needs to be done in the background. So being part of a larger organization, at Hiscox, our ESG committee drives day-to-day progress and reporting to ensure our underwriting function is acting as a steward of nature and encouraging the transition to a low carbon economy. And that is embedded in what we do at the ILS level, the reinsurance level, and the group level. But more broadly, and again, that's the advantage of being part of a wider organization, Hiscox has committed to reduce and eventually eliminate our exposure to thermal coal, oil sand, Arctic energy exploration, and controversial weapons. And in addition, we have signed up the United Nations Principles for Responsible Investments, the PRI, demonstrated that we are committing to responsible investing.
Yeah, that's quite refreshing to hear somebody say that there's a lot more work to do, because there clearly is, but it's clearly the right thing for managers in the space to be doing as well, because there's opportunity, but also the responsibility of managing assets in the right way, which is really critical. So finally, we're talking about a complex asset class, insurance-linked securities, and it always seems to me that there's two things that are really essential for the managers, both the investor education, ensuring that investors understand the risks that are being taken on and the sort of dynamics of this asset class, but also educating investors that a long-term view is really the right way to enter the space as well. So how do you at Hiscox ILS encourage investors to become long-term partners? And is this education just an ongoing process?
Yes, it's exactly that. We, from the get-go, as they're not even investors, when they're just prospects, we are telling our future partners that they have to have a long-term view on this. And if you think about all the successful investors out there that are still around, they've had that long-term view from the beginning. And of course, education is part of that, and it's an ongoing process. One of the reasons we've been successful in creating long-term partnership with our investors is the transparency that comes with the education. Our investors have been in touch at a point or another with every single teams within the Hiscox Re and ILS group. So, of course, the various underwriting teams on a regular basis, as we are an aligned model, but also the claims team, the finance team, the risk and analytics teams, whether it's to talk with actuaries, to talk with cat modelers, but also to talk about climate change, for example. So the fact that we literally opened not just our underwriting capabilities, but every single sector of what we do really made them more aware of how we work, and the better understanding they have of what we do, the better they can assess the value we bring to them, if you want. So in this case, of course, we want them to have that long-term view, which ultimately benefits us as managers. So yes, we are definitely trying to build long-term partnership with our investors so that they can benefit from our actuarial, our modeling, our negotiation, execution, and of course the finance side with the valuation and the as well. And in the past recent year, that helps us a lot, the claims, being able to have access to all of those various teams of a reinsurance company during the difficult years really help us create the confidence to move forward with those investors.
Yeah, and that's really important. You're helping them to understand the business from the sort of the ground up rather than seeing it just from one side, which is really important for them. So look, thank you, Vincent. I really appreciate you spending some time today talking to me about your practice there at Hiscox ILS, and thank you for the support for the conference. For all of our viewers, you will be able to book tickets still, so do visit the event website, but a little warning that eventually they will run out, we think, before the date. So thanks again, Vincent. It was great to see you today.
Thank you, Steve. Look forward to seeing you in April in New York.
Absolutely.